Sorry. It's all right.
Okay, so I'm here today with Charlie Gurr. Charlie, I'll let you introduce yourselves to tell the listeners who you are and why we've been in contact with each other.
Okay, yeah, so I'm a trainee journalist at the University of Kent, the Centre for Journalism, and I'm in my second year of studying there, and I've been sort of working on different pieces throughout my time in year two, and I decided to, I saw a quite a prominent issue of spiking sort of towards the end of last year, and so decided to do one of my assignments, basically speaking to a victim of spiking, and then I decided to I'd then continue on with that sort of investigation into spiking. And did a separate story sort of beginning of this year in January, sort of looking at sort of issues of spiking within my county of Kent and sort of the wider sort of area of England, I guess, and got in contact with Dawn and the work you do and sort of trying to find out what needs to be done to try and resolve spiking. So thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to come on. It is just like, when I know we've had our initial meeting and we've spoke about, the drink spiking incidents around Kent and the surrounding area. And, I think that the victims that you've spoken to have been really brave, really, to step forward and to share their experiences with you, because I know firsthand how, humiliated people feel and embarrassed. And actually, because they have no memory of what's happened to them, it's so difficult to share that experience, which I think this is why we were finding it so difficult for victims to stand up and to share their experiences. So how did you find it trying to locate victims to actually talk to you, to share their experience?
That's the thing, because a lot of you hear sort of stories about spiking and different things, but then actually trying to find people willing to speak about it is quite difficult. And so I sort of put a message out on social media, and then eventually sort of heard back in sort of group chats and university group chats I have of sort of a friend of a friend who knew someone who had been spiked and would be willing to speak about it, and they wanted to remain anonymous with that, which I totally understand, because obviously it's a quite a personal thing to be talking about. And they then sort of had a call and sort of discussed some of the experience that they had, and how they went about trying to deal with that, how they went to try and sort of get tested, and they found it so difficult to be able to find a place that would be able to test them in the first place, finding someone who has the knowledge that isn't just going to kick them out of a pub or a club thinking they're drunk, finding someone who actually believes them. And that's been the common thing. I saw an interview, I think it's Sharon Gafka, a former Love Island contestant,
Yes,
who was on the TV sort of in the new year, talking about her experience of spiking. And she said it's the issue of being believed. It's not only do you think you've been spiked, but then it's finding out a way you can actually try and prove this, and get evidence to say to these people that you have been spiked. It's not that you're drunk too much, and that you're actually trying to find a solution with it. And so often they're kind of just dismissed, aren't they?
Yeah, they really are. It's myth against fact. And because this crime is so difficult to prove, I hear this time and time again. And you imagine putting yourself in that position, and you've been spiked, and either if you're robbed or you've been sexually assaulted or raped, and then nobody believes you. It's just got to be the most upsetting. Well, it is the most horrid crime. And as you know, when I've explained to you before, I've been campaigning for this since 2005. And it's just been going on for years. And for me, thank goodness for social media, because I never thought I would say those words, to be honest with you. I'm so I'm so old fashioned. I've still got my paper diary, but social media has really highlighted that claw-like vision that we have of Millie Taplin and her mum sharing that across social media. And then things just erupted, and now we've got the needle spiking, of course, which I don't think that's as prevalent whatsoever, but still it's an issue that needs to be challenged. So Charlie, what I'd like to do, I'd like to speak to you. I know that I spoke to you before, reference the oh yes, I'm talking about social media. I managed to share something with you without having to ring up one of my young people who work alongside me to say, help, how do I do this? So what did you think of the survey that the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office put across? Because they had 8,200 women who came back. Well, what did you think of that survey?
Yeah, so for my story I was doing, I did have a good look at that what you sent through to me, because I remember we spoke about it last time about how sort of amazing it is these people have come forward, and they've got this wide range of people, different women from in their 60s down to I think about 11 years old. I think it went down to potentially, I think I can't remember exactly the age specifics, but I remember what I found particularly surprising was the amount of people who had these offences against them, whether it's sort of spiking or another offence, and who hadn't reported it. I think it was, I can't remember the specific percentage, but it was so very low in terms of the amount of people who hadn't reported it. And the main reason they gave was they didn't think they'd be believed. And I think that's such a sad thing to see, because
It really is.
when you think, if a crime happens, you want to be able to go to the police and say, I've been spiked, or whatever it might be, and have someone say, okay, these are the steps you can do to try and actually make this, well, to try and deal with this. And so again, I saw that, and then there was the actual conviction rates after that. I mean, I had a look at conviction rates within the county of Kent. I think it was outside about 8.3%, I think, of spiking cases that actually lead to arrests within Kent. And I also, I mean, you sent me through the statistics you'd found throughout the different police forces throughout England and the UK. And again, the figures of convictions are so low because it's so difficult to actually prove this, to actually get someone tested within that really narrow window and actually get that to prove it.
I know, it's just, it really is just so dreadful. And I mean, let's home in on Kent. So you study there at university, like you just said. So do you know, what's the general opinion between the guys and girls up there going for a night out these days? Are people worried about going out? Are people not going out so much? What's the opinion?
Yeah, I think there's certainly a reluctance for people to go out and go out to nightclubs and go out to pubs, particularly sort of towards the end of last year when you had sort of cases of needle spiking as well, because you can do all you can to protect your drink, to use whether it's a stop tops or another device used to try and stop this drink spiking from happening. But in terms of spiking by injection, there's not really, it's so difficult to prevent that from happening. Because I mean, I saw a case in the news of someone who'd been spiked on the hand, and you think, who would go to a pub or club and wear gloves to a club? You wouldn't think, oh, you know what, I'm going to have a drink at the pub, I'll make sure to wear gloves the whole time. And you just think it's so scary to, as a student and as someone who obviously is amongst other students as well. There's still people that do go out to pubs and clubs, but there's certainly a reluctance and a feeling that it is coming with risks, and it shouldn't be that. You shouldn't be, whatever case it might be, you shouldn't have to then say, well, why weren't you looking after your drink? You should have been watching your drink, because obviously that's now become the norm. But you shouldn't have to go to a pub or a club and think, I need to be constantly watching my drink, I need to be constantly being on my guard, making sure everyone's, because you go there to have a sociable time, you go there to have a good time, enjoy spending time with your friends. And so then part of that is then spent trying to look after your drink, which I think is such a shame.
It is, it really is. And you know, I just can't believe that we've got to this state, really. I really can't. And you know, for some of these young people that are just now going out for the first time, you know, going out to a nightclub, and then they get their drink spiked. How are they ever going to go out and enjoy themselves again and freely have a party and you know, and have good fun if that's happened to them?
Yeah, because I suppose it's not even just pubs and clubs that these are happening in. These is sort of outside venues. It can be at residential places as well. So it's not even the case of it just being at a pub or a club. And so all of a sudden, these youngsters, I mean, for instance, I turned 18 during lockdown. And so I couldn't exactly go out and celebrate my birthday then. I spent it at home having chicken nuggets and chips, I think, in front of the TV.
Oh no,
my 18th birthday.
Oh, Charlie, don't.
So a lot of people haven't really had the opportunity to go out and celebrate, and be able to go out and sort of buy themselves a drink or go out with friends. And so all of a sudden, when lockdown sort of eased and people were able to go and do stuff again, we saw this big spike of spiking cases happening again. And obviously, when I was looking at Kent, there's been, I think, other than 2014 and 2020, since 2013, so in the last 8 years, there's been a rise every single year.
Yeah.
And that shows that this is a problem that either is increasing or more people are actually reporting this instead. But then it's a case of trying to think, well, irrespective of that, action still needs to be taken to raise awareness of this and help people understand the symptoms and try and get more testing in place, I guess, isn't it?
Definitely. So what would, I always try and speak to my guests and always ask, what do you think we can do about this crime?
Yes, obviously, sort of the fundamental thing, I think, which is what I think you're doing, which is great, is the educational side of things, trying to get people to understand the symptoms and differences between just being drunk and actually being spiked, and getting that sort of education through not just the people going out, but also the nighttime staff, whether it's sort of people working behind the bars, but also in terms of increasing the availability of testing, because I know I think a lot of hospitals don't actually test for this kind of thing. I saw on the same thing with the Sharon Gafka, the resident doctor on the TV at the time, was saying that people think the NHS is sort of equipped for doing drug tests on every person that comes in, but that's not necessarily the case. And so unless there's sort of something substantial in terms of someone's reaction to this, then it doesn't go to the toxicology. The blood doesn't actually get tested necessarily. And so they end up getting told, we need to go to the police. But I've heard of many cases now where people have been spiked, and by the time they've been told, or by the time they've found out the place you go to is the police, it's out of the system. Yep. And at which point it's too late, and they have no way of proving that it was in their system in the first place.
That is such a perfect way to end this podcast, because for me, Charlie, there was a massive gap in service provision, and you've just hit the nail on the head. So somebody goes out, they get their drink spiked, they go to hospital. And I don't know if you saw on the second week of the Home Affairs Committee at Westminster, but one of the doctors of the Royal College of Medicine actually came back and said, for somebody to go into hospital once they've had their drink spiked, there's nothing medically that can be done for them. So, we're talking about the NHS and beds and wasting money, the public's money. And, if you've had your drink spiked, it's very distressing, for the person who's been spiked, very distressing for the people who are watching that person that's been spiked, but actually nothing can actually be done done for them medically. So they need to be looked after. They need to be safeguarded. And that's going to be really by someone that they love. So I just feel like exactly what you've just said. Why isn't there somewhere in the middle that we can get the testing done, that we can get the bloods taken or urine samples, so that the police have got evidence? I think we all need to be helping the police on this, because it's difficult enough for them to do their job. Like every service, we're all overstretched on every service that we have. But if we can make the police's job easier, I think that would be so much better for the general public, for the staff in the nighttime economy, and of course for young students and people who are out partying. So my last words from you, Charlie. Thank you so much for joining me today. And any last words that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think it's just like you say, it's just a case of trying to have something in place that people, if they've been spiked, they know that they're called to action. They know, okay, right, if you've been spiked, I can go to this place, I can go to the police and get tested, because it's such a horrible thing to have to go through. So I think, like you say, just making sure that there's things in place, the education, but also the facilities available, so people know what to do when it comes to actually trying to resolve what they've been through. But yeah, so thank you very much for having me on the podcast, and hopefully it's helped to raise more awareness about the issue.
Thank you, Charlie Gurr from Kent University.